Hey everybody, it's Rob with Dark Side Morphs, and today we're doing a snake unboxing live on camera. Alright, now that the goofy intro is out of the way, which I have not filmed yet because I didn't bumble a box with a live snake in it, I shot the rest of this video and then I filmed the intro with an empty box, no snake in it. Don't worry, I'm not that dumb. Here's the actual unboxing. This is really exciting for me. This is something I've been working on for a little bit here. So let me go ahead and get this box cut open. We'll take a look at what we have here, and then I'll explain it to you. So first off, I'll give a quick shout out, which maybe this is dangerous because I haven't opened her yet, but a shout out to Hourglass. Hourglass is who I bought this girl from. So we've got it already that it's a girl. You can buy a girl. And so far the packaging looks great. It's a well insulated box. We have a heat pack taped to the lid that is still warm. And she was coming to me from Ohio and I'm in Oregon, so that's a pretty long trip. And based on that heat pack, I'm thinking she was kept plenty toasty. Now, that's a good sized box, but the bag that's in it, not that big. As a matter of fact, if you get down to what's actually there, you're about not even the size of a softball. So what do we have? Wouldn't it be horrible if this was an unboxing to a snake that wasn't in good condition? I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. But they have a great rating on Morph Market, so I trust that I'm dealing with a good shipper, a good breeder that takes good care of his reptiles. And she's moving in my hand, so that means she is good to go. And she is currently wrapped around a paper towel that she does not want to let go of. So tell you what, little friend girl, you can hold on to your paper towel as long as you want. But what we have here is a female 75% super dwarf reticulated python. And she was hatched in October of 24. In case you're seeing this way in the future, it is currently end of April of 2025. So, I mean, it's literally gonna be May tomorrow. So she's about 7 months old. I don't know when in October, it just said October of 24. She really does not want to give up the paper towel. That's really funny. She is a normal morph, which means no morph. She's a wild type. I mean, that's pretty much how reticulated pythons look in the wild. Wish this would focus just a little bit more. But man, she is gorgeous and she is in beautiful shape. We'll go ahead and get some B-roll of her while I kind of explain to the people that don't know what a super dwarf reticulated python is. So let me get her set up in her tub and I'll be right back. All right, here she is in her tub. That's going to be her home for the time being. She is absolutely beautiful. We're going to try not to stress her out too bad because it was a big day coming from Ohio to Oregon. That's quite the trip. That was done through FedEx overnight delivery, and they've always been great for me. But man, she is an absolute stunner. All right, now that we've got somewhat of a decent look at her, and we'll get some better looks later on, I just don't want to stress her out because I literally just pulled her out of the box, came home from FedEx after picking her up. And it's really important with any snake that you work with. That's a very traumatic process, and snakes are really prone to be stressed out. So it's really important that once you get them home and you get them set up in their quarantine area, you just really leave them alone for a while. And that actually is going to be perfect for me because I'm leaving on vacation in 3 days and I'll be gone for 8 days. So other than my daughter, who will be house sitting for me, peeking in on her every once in a while, she will be left totally alone, and that's good for me because I'd be so tempted to check her out, and it's just best to really leave her alone so it'll be easier because I won't be around to do it. Anyway, getting back to what a super dwarf reticulated python is. Reticulated pythons have an incredibly huge range. It's about 3,000 miles, and it starts on the eastern edge of Turkey it goes all the way down into a bunch of Indonesian islands. It goes through Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, and other very large land masses. And on these large land masses, including some of the bigger islands in Indonesia, can't talk today, they have what us in the pet trade call mainland reticulated pythons. And what we mean when we say mainland is they are found on large bodies, and on large bodies there are plenty of large prey. And those mainland reticulated pythons, females can go 21 to 25 feet, with the biggest on record, I don't know if it was actually verified or not, biggest on record being 32 feet and 350 pounds. And that is an incredibly, incredibly massive snake. And so anybody wanting to get a mainland reticulated python has really got to be dedicated to it and really be available to have a lot of space available. Now in captivity, especially with conservative feeding, they probably shouldn't get that big. It's become more and more standard to feed them less. It used to be people would just power feed these giant snakes just to get them more giant and more girthy. And a lot of the videos you see on YouTube of reticulated pythons are incredibly obese, and in kind of bad shape. I am a conservative feeder. I'm a slow grower with all my snakes. I feed them smaller meals than a lot, but not enough to make them emaciated or skinny or in any way, shape, or form. I just want a snake that's going to last for a really long time. And typically people that feed really big meals on a frequent basis to get their snakes up to size quickly, a lot of those snakes don't see their 10th birthday. And I want a long, happy life for my snakes. So they're fed conservatively in a reasonable time frame so that they grow slowly, but not in any way skinny or emaciated. Anyway, mainland retics are massive, massive, massive snakes. Well, there's smaller land masses, smaller islands really in the Indonesia area that produce what we've coined dwarf and super dwarf localities. Lots of times in the snake pet industry, when you hear percentages, they're saying what percentage of chance that snake carries a specific gene. And what we're talking about with these guys is not a gene. It's not a color morph or anything else that'll show up through breeding, like a recessive or a dominant or a codominant, incomplete dominant, any of that. We're literally talking about the percentage of the animal's DNA that comes from these smaller localities. So with a superdwarf, typically the islands that produce a superdwarf are Kalatoa, Madu, and Karampa. Those are considered the superdwarf islands, or the snakes that come from those islands are considered to be superdwarf, which means that they're far smaller, and that would come from what they call insular dwarfism or the island effect. There is not large prey to support a large snake, so they're living on small rodents and birds and bats and lizards and whatever else they can get a hold of, but they don't have a lot of opportunity to eat much bigger prey that they have on the mainland, wild pigs and things like that, farmers' goats, all kinds of stuff. So with this female in particular, she is 75%. And the way that breaks down is her father or sire was an F1 Kalatoa. F1 means that he was the first generation hatched in captivity, which means both of his parents were wild, both from the island of Kalatoa, so he is pure Kalatoa, F1, first generation born in captivity. The mother is 50% what they call old school super dwarf, which means it's not really sure exactly what her percentages are, but they've been in breeding long enough that they know that it's a smaller snake. And her mother, being a 50% super dwarf, is approximately 11 feet long. So she should grow to somewhere in between there. The problem with retics, especially being this early on in the breeding of dwarf and super dwarf, is there's no sure thing. You have to be willing to be adaptable. If you're going to get a retic with any mainland blood in it, you need to be prepared to be adaptable because you might end up with a bigger snake than you think. However, there's things you can do to give you a little bit more surety when it comes to buying one as far as what you're going to end up with. And that is talking to the breeders. It is very important that you ask plenty of questions of the breeder. And if they're an honest, good breeder, they will understand why you're asking those questions and be more than happy to answer them. When I find out what the size of the parents is, the very first question I ask is how old are they and what kind of feeding schedule they're on. Because if they are fed super conservatively and they're maybe at the very beginning of being sexually mature, you might be told, well, the mother's only 7 feet long, but maybe she's a 4-year-old. Maybe she's going to eventually be a 12 or 13 foot snake. So you might think that you're getting, parents are 6 and 7 feet long, you're going to have a baby that's 6 or 7 feet long. Well, at some point they will, but they might grow bigger because maybe the parents were not even close to done growing when they reproduced. So as for the age, I don't want to see a parent less than 7 years old if I'm trying to gauge a length. And even that might not be enough because snakes are indeterminate growers. Snakes will grow the entirety of their lifespan. However, after a certain point, it slows down tremendously. If they're at least 7 years old, you can be sure that the vast bulk of their growing is done. And supposedly these are both 7-year-old parents. I feel fairly confident, especially with the rating that this breeder has on Morph Market. And that's really all I have to go on, is that he's probably being honest with me, and I'm prepared to have a snake that's every bit as big as the mother. She could be every bit of 11 feet long, most likely not, but I'm ready to be adaptable as time goes on and as the snake grows to make whatever changes necessary to provide for her well. Now she is small. I think for a 7-month-old snake, she's really small, so I'm fairly confident she's going to stay very small, and that's really cool. I think as time goes on, as more and more people are breeding the dwarf and super dwarf blood, and more people are getting into the dwarf and super dwarf reticulated pythons, I think you'll eventually get to a point where you can be a little bit more sure on what you're going to get as far as adult size when you buy a snake. Time will tell, but it seems to be that's the direction that we're going. Just be aware, if you're buying a retic, it's not like buying a ball python where you just kind of know, well, the chances of it being more than 5 feet are very slim. You don't really question much when it comes to ball pythons, when it comes to size. You know how big a ball python's going to be. The problem with retics, especially when you have dwarf blood, super dwarf blood, and mainland blood, and it's all mixed and all combined, is you don't have that surety, and they vary so tremendously. You could have a 7-foot fully adult female super dwarf, or you could have a 25-foot female mainland. I've even heard of 50% Calatoa females getting to almost full mainland size retics because that 50% mainland DNA took over and made them far bigger, especially if you have people that just get a thrill out of watching them eat the biggest prey that they possibly can, because that's what some people do. Some people are into snakes because they really want to watch them feed, and they get a thrill over watching them feed. And I'm not saying that I don't, but it doesn't overtake my logic and wanting what's best for the snake. And what's best for the snake is not stuffing them with huge meals on a constant basis. It's feeding conservatively, appropriate sized meals, and allowing nature to take its course in a more forgiving time frame that's not going to put such a stress and strain in their organs. I also give all my snakes food breaks from time to time. I have some snakes that get fed every week, and sometimes they go 2 or 3 weeks without being fed. That is what happens in nature, and snakes don't suffer from it. I wouldn't do that with a baby, but I have adults that sometimes take some breaks, and that's not a bad thing for them. It's what happens in nature. It is a huge stress on their organs every time they eat, and so it's good to give their organs a chance to really recuperate. And that's what happens in the wild. There's feast and famine in the wild when it comes to prey, especially different times of the year. A snake in the summer is probably going to eat a lot more rodents because rodents are breeding and all that. Then you get to wintertime and they're not breeding. All the really young dumb ones have already been eaten, and pickings are much more slim, and they still do well in the wild. That's just the way of things, and that's how I choose to raise my snakes, and as of yet I have not suffered any ill consequences from that. That being said, I'm super excited about this girl, and I'm going to really have a hard time, except for once I'm on vacation, not constantly checking her out because she is absolutely gorgeous. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the unboxing video, and I hope you come back. There's a brand new channel. We've got a lot of content planned, and I hope that you're there for it and you get some interest out of it. Anyway, we'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.